The morning Otis's land finally cleared probate, I was standing in my own driveway in Colton's Mill, Ohio, breathing on my hands, trying to get Darius's truck to turn over before he had to be at the feed store by 7. He thanked me twice. He always did that when I did something small for him. Like the thanking made up for whatever he was not saying. I made eggs after. Danielle came down in her barn coat, hair still wet. Told me the coffee was too strong again, the way she has every morning for 2 years, without once making it herself. It was an ordinary morning. A house I had spent most of the good years of my life inside of. I never once thought to wonder what they already knew, sitting across that table from me, buttering toast like nothing in the world had changed. Before we go any further, please subscribe to True Deceit Stories and tell us in the comments where you are listening from tonight. Now, back to Colton's Mill. The call about Otis came on a Thursday afternoon in September. I was up on a ladder, cleaning gutters that did not need cleaning. It was a hospice chaplain out of Tucson, Arizona. A kind stranger. Her voice had clearly made this call more times than she wanted to count. She told me my brother had died in his sleep 2 nights before, of a heart condition he had never once mentioned to me. 19 years of not speaking, and I never even knew his heart was bad. Otis and I had not spoken since the spring our father died. He wanted to sell the home farm outside Toboso to a subdivision developer. I would not sign my half of it away. We said things to each other at that kitchen table that neither of us ever unsaid. He left for Texas that summer. I heard about the rest of his life the way you hear about weather in another state. Secondhand. Too late to matter. I used to tell myself the door was still open. Neither of us ever tried to open it. Now neither of us ever would. What I learned over the following weeks, mostly from a probate attorney in Tucson and later from Licking County Probate Court itself, was this. Otis had spent the better part of 2 decades doing something I would never have guessed. He had gone quiet, worked hard, bought back 80 acres of our father's old land out along the national road toward Toboso, one parcel at a time, under a name I did not recognize until the deeds came through. He had never told me. He had never told anyone. A solar company out of Columbus had been circling that stretch of road for 2 years, offering leases that would make 80 acres of scrub corn worth more than either of us had earned in a working lifetime. Otis, it turned out, had known that too. The land alone appraised at $900,000. Another $100,000 sat in a money market account in Amarillo, Texas, forgotten by everyone except a man who apparently thought about home more than he ever said out loud. $1 million in land and cash. Left entirely to me. There was a note in the file, in handwriting I had not seen in 19 years and still knew instantly. It began with my name, for my brother Curtis. It said only that the North 80 had always been mine as much as his, that he was sorry it took him this long to say so, that he hoped I would keep it and never sell it to strangers. He signed it the way he signed everything as a boy. Just his first name, nothing else. I had spent 31 years as the Licking County recorder before I retired. None of what came after this confused me on the paperwork, and I want to say that plainly. It was the rest of it I was not prepared for. Danielle and Darius had been living with me by then, for the better part of 2 years. Darius's title business had folded. After a flip deal, went bad 2 towns over and took most of what they had with it. I did not mind having them there. The house had been too quiet since Danielle's mother passed. There is a particular kind of silence that 2 more people in the kitchen fixes without anyone having to say so. I did not tell them about Otis right away. Grief does something strange to a man who has spent his whole working life inside county records. Every event has a date, a witness, a place it gets filed. I kept driving to Newark every week to sit with the probate attorney. Watching the paperwork move the way I used to watch it move for other families. Except this time it was mine. I found I did not know how to file this particular loss anywhere at all. Darius asked about it once, carefully. The way you ask a man about money you suspect he has and does not want to discuss. I told him it was still working its way through the court. That much, at least, was true. I told myself I was waiting to be certain everything was clean before I said a word to anyone. I believed that was the whole reason. The day the court finally closed it out, I drove home a different way than usual, out past the old home farm, just to look at it. There was nothing to see but corn stubble, and a realtor's sign someone had planted at the end of the lane years before Otis ever got the place back. I remember thinking I would tell Danielle and Darius at supper. I had it planned almost like a small ceremony. I would bring the folder in, set it on the table, let them ask questions. For once in a long while, the whole house would have something good to sit inside of together. It was already dusk when I turned up Miller Chapel Road, past the Hendersons' place, past the little Methodist church, lights always left on for nobody in particular. Our house sat back off the road behind the old maple, kitchen window lit up, warm and yellow, the way it always was at that hour. For a moment it looked exactly like every other evening of the 2 years they had lived with me. Then I saw how they were sitting. Danielle was at the table, elbows pulled in tight against her sides. The way she used to sit as a girl. When she had done something she knew she would be asked about. Darius was standing, not sitting, leaning over her, one hand flat on the table, the other holding something I could not make out from the driveway, talking in a low, steady, unhurried way. People do not use that voice for ordinary conversation. I have sat across a desk from a great many people in 31 years of recording other people's business. I know the difference between two people discussing supper and two people discussing something they do not want overheard. I sat in the truck in the driveway, with the heater fan winding down, folder on the seat beside me. I did not go in right away. I told myself it was nothing. I have never been a good liar, even to myself. I was not one that evening either. The kitchen window was propped on its latch a couple of inches, the way it has been propped since the summer. The extractor fan went, and nobody replaced it. I could hear the rise and fall of Darius's voice through the gap, if not the words. The particular rhythm of a man laying something out point by point. The way a man sounds when he has practiced a thing more than once. I sat there long enough that the windscreen went gray with my own breath. I still did not go in. Some old instinct, built over 3 decades of paperwork, told me it would keep a few minutes longer, that I would learn more standing still than I ever would walking in with a folder and a smile. I got out of the truck quiet, the way you learn to get out of a truck when you do not want gravel announcing you. I went up along the flower bed instead of the walk, closer to that window than I had any business being in my own yard. There was a paper on the table in front of Danielle. Even through glass, even 31 years since I had done the job for a living, I knew what I was looking at. It had the shape of a deed. Not the county's paper. Not yet. The kind you print off a template and fill in yourself before you ever walk it in to be recorded. There was a signature line at the bottom. Something written on it that, from where I stood, looked almost exactly like my own hand. Darius was still talking. Danielle had her thumbnail between her teeth. She has done that since she was 6 years old, and she only does it when she knows she is doing something she should not be doing. He was telling her, calm as a man, reading a weather report, that the solar company wanted an answer inside the month, that his old escrow contact at the title office could push it through quiet if they moved now, that the North 80 needed to be in both their names before I had any reason to go looking at it myself. Then he said the thing I would carry for months afterward, the thing I still hear some nights when the house is too quiet. All we need is something that looks like his signature, not his signature itself. I did not move. I did not knock on the glass. I did not open the door. I did not say one word. I stood in my own flower bed in the near dark and let that sentence finish landing before I let myself breathe out. 31 years behind a recorder's counter teaches you three things if you are paying attention. I want to give them to you plainly, the way I would have given them to a new deputy on her first week. The first is that a document is only as honest as the last person who touched it. Everyone assumes a deed is true because it looks official. Almost nobody ever asks who actually held the pen. The second is that nobody forges an entire file. It is too much work and too easy to catch. They forge one page, sometimes one signature line. They count on the fact that nobody reads the rest closely enough to notice the one page that does not belong. The third is the one that mattered most that evening in my own driveway. The recorder's office does not ask whether a deed is true. It only asks whether it was properly executed. Signed, witnessed, notarized, filed within the rules. Truth was never our department. Truth was somebody else's job. For 31 years, I had simply trusted that somebody else was doing it. I walked around to the front steps, stepped over the second board from the top. The way I have done without thinking for 20 years, since it creaks, and I never got around to fixing it. Opened the door like a man who had spent his evening exactly where he said he would be. Danielle looked up fast. Darius did not look up at all for a beat too long, which told me something too. "Smells good in here," I said. Asked what was for supper. Hung my jacket on the hook by the door, the way I hang it every evening of my life. Nobody in that kitchen could have told you one thing had changed in me. I made sure of that. I called Roberta Sims 2 mornings later. Roberta had worked the recording counter beside me for 26 years, before she retired. There is nobody alive who reads a chain of title faster or trusts one less. We sat at her kitchen table in Newark, 2 cups of coffee going cold between us. I told her everything I had seen and heard through that window. She did not look surprised. That told me something about how often this happens to people who are not paying attention. She said, "If that page ever got notarized and recorded, it would not matter how good the forgery looked on its own. It would only matter whether I had actually stood in front of that notary and signed it myself." I certainly had not. Whoever notarized it would have committed a crime of her own, whether or not she understood that at the time. Everything after that came apart from that one loose thread. Roberta said she suspected that was exactly why they had gone this route. Instead of trying to convince Licking County Probate Court to put me under a guardianship. A route that would have collapsed the moment anyone sat me down for an hour and asked me real questions. We talked through what a case like this would actually need. Proof of where I truly was, on whatever date they eventually used for the signing. The notary's own practices, since Ohio does not require a journal the way some states do. Roberta said that probably made this route look even easier to them. Records from the recorder's office itself, the kind I used to sign off on for 31 years. Showing exactly when a document entered the system and in what condition it arrived. She pushed a small silver recorder across the table toward me before I left, said I would want my own record of anything said in that house from here on out. Reminded me that Ohio only needed one party in a conversation to consent to being recorded. I happened to be that party every single time I was in the room. I put it in my shirt pocket on the drive home and did not touch it again for 3 days. That night, after everyone had gone to bed, I went out to the shop, pulled the tarp off the cedar chest I had started building for Danielle. The same spring Otis and I stopped speaking. Never finished. Not one day of the 19 years since. I ran my hand along the raw wood a long while before I picked up the sander. It felt like the only honest thing left to do with my hands. Over the following 2 weeks, I built a record. The same patient way I had spent 31 years teaching other people to build one. One small true thing at a time. I learned, mostly through the kitchen window and the recorder in my shirt pocket, that the notary Darius had lined up was a woman named Patricia Loomis. She ran the signing desk at the same small title office where his own business used to send its closings back before it folded. I learned they meant to backdate the document to a week when I actually had been out of the county entirely. At a cardiology follow-up, 2 counties over, that I had told exactly one person about. That person was Danielle. I learned the plan was never a full, quiet title suit, not at first. It was simpler than that. Get the forged deed recorded quietly. Let a little time pass, so it looked settled. Only then, if anyone ever asked, file to clear the title, formally. Make the whole thing look like an old family matter. Nobody wanted to relitigate. I heard Darius tell Danielle twice that I would never think to check the recorder's own timestamp against my own calendar. Because why would a man check up on his own daughter? I heard him say it would be cleaner, faster, and cheaper than waiting for me to die of natural causes. He said it the way another man might complain about a slow contractor. That same week, a caseworker from the county's Adult Protective Services office came to my door. A Tuesday afternoon, responding to a concern that I had seemed confused and forgetful lately, and might be a danger managing my own affairs. She asked me the date. She asked me who the president was. She asked me to count backward from 100 by sevens. I did it without missing a beat, the same way I used to do arithmetic against a stack of deeds for a living. She closed the file as unfounded before she left my porch. Thanked me for my patience. I thanked her for hers. Neither of us said out loud what we both understood by then about where that call had likely come from. Through all of it, my own behavior did not change by one visible degree. I split wood. I paid the light bill. I sanded the cedar chest 45 minutes most evenings, a little more each night. Routine was the only thing keeping my hands from shaking in front of people who were watching me for exactly that. I called the Licking County Sheriff's Office on a Saturday morning and asked for whoever handled financial crimes. Within the hour, I was sitting across a folding table from a detective named Paul Marsh, a quiet, careful man about Danielle's age, who listened to the whole recording twice before he said one word. He called me Mr. Broadnax for the whole of that first conversation, though by the third week he had switched to Curtis without seeming to notice he had done it. He told me what I already half knew, from 31 years of watching people file paperwork with bad intentions. What I had was good. It was not finished. He wanted to loop in the State Attorney General's Financial Crimes Unit, a scheme that crossed county lines and touched a licensed notary, was bigger than one sheriff's office alone. He asked whether I would be willing to let the sale process keep moving under watch. A controlled development, he called it. So that when Patricia Loomis actually put her seal on that forged page, and when Darius actually took the recorded deed to the solar company to sign the lease, there would be nothing left for a defense attorney to call speculation. We set a date for the closing meeting at the title office. 3 weeks out. Chosen because it was the earliest the solar company's lawyer could make it. Darius had no reason to think anyone was waiting on it but him. Those 3 weeks were the longest of my life, and the most ordinary looking from the outside. I kept every habit I had ever had. I went to church. I watched the Buckeyes lose a game they should have won. I sat on the porch most evenings, radio low, watching the corn come off the fields 2 roads over, one of the last harvests before that whole stretch went under solar panels for good, whatever came of any of this. One Sunday afternoon, Danielle sat down at the kitchen table with my bottles and the plastic box that has the 7 lids on it. She has done that every Sunday since the cardiologist first put me on the thin blue ones. She does not trust me to do it myself, and she is right not to. She lined the bottles up in the order she likes them, popped each lid, counted the tablets out into the little compartments by day, saying the days under her breath the way she does, so she will not lose her place. Checked that the repeat slip was still in the drawer where it lives. Asked whether the pharmacy in Newark had the new ones in yet, or whether I would have to drive over to Heath for them. She did not say one word about Otis's land, or the Notary, or Darius, or anything at all that mattered. Neither did I. She closed the last lid, set the box on the windowsill where I would see it first thing, put her hand flat on my shoulder for a second on her way past the way she has done since she was tall enough to reach it. I sat at that table a long while after she went up, looking at 7 closed lids in a row on the windowsill, understanding 2 things at the exact same time, in a way that did not cancel each other out. She was going to stand by and let this happen to me. And she was going to go on, counting out the tablets that keep my heart going while it happened, every Sunday, without missing one. My brother died of a heart he never mentioned to anybody. My daughter has known about mine for 4 years and has never once let a Sunday go by. I have not figured out what to do with all of that being true at once. That afternoon I did not try. I sat there and let her have it. When the morning of the closing finally came, Detective Marsh met me 2 miles out, on State Route 16, went over exactly what I was and was not permitted to say. Told me Patricia Loomis had no idea what kind of morning she was about to have. Patricia Loomis had her own small office in the back of the title company. Outdated certificates on the wall. A stamp and a seal laid out on the desk, like tools she was proud of. She smiled when I came in alone. The practiced professional smile of a woman who signs 40 documents a week and remembers none of the faces attached to them. She asked me to state my full name for the file. I gave it, clear and slow, the way I have given testimony 100 times in 31 years of county work. She asked me to confirm the date and my address. I did that too, without a flicker, because none of it was a lie. Everything I said to her that morning was true. That was the whole point. Then, before she could slide the page toward me, I asked her one question of my own. I asked how many notarizations, on average, she performed in a given month, working out of an office like hers. She blinked, said something vague about it varying. I told her that was fine, that I understood, and that I was not actually there to sign anything at all, because I already had, weeks earlier, without ever once walking through her door. According to the deed already recorded down at the courthouse, with her seal on it. I watched her face do the thing I imagine every dishonest signature does the moment it understands. It has finally been read correctly. I told her the recorder in my shirt pocket had been running the entire conversation. That under Ohio's single-party consent law, that was entirely legal, since I was a party to it myself. That Detective Marsh was in the parking lot and would like a word with her whenever she was ready. I did not raise my voice. I did not tell her what I thought of her. I stood up, thanked her for her time, the way you thank anyone whose office you are leaving, walked back out to the truck. I sat in the driver's seat a long moment before I turned the key. I did not say one word out loud the whole drive home. There was nobody in the truck to hear me if I had. The knock came 11 days later. A Thursday morning, just past 9. I was sitting in the front room, in the armchair that has been mine since before Danielle was born, working the last coat of finish into the cedar chest across my knees. I did not get up. Detective Marsh had told me exactly what morning to expect it. Asked if I was willing to simply be present in the house and let it happen the way it needed to happen. I had told him I would rather be nowhere else. 2 sheriff's deputies came up the porch steps. I heard the second board from the top creak under one of them, the way it always does, the way I never fixed it. Darius answered the door still in his undershirt. I watched his face rather than theirs. I had spent 31 years learning that an officer's face never tells you anything worth knowing. His went through disbelief, then something closer to relief, in about 4 seconds. The particular relief of a man who has been waiting for a thing to finally happen so he can stop carrying the waiting itself. Danielle came around the corner from the kitchen in her robe. I watched her face the longest. That was the one I had actually come into that room to watch. I was looking, I think, for some version of the girl who used to run down these same stairs at 6 in the morning every Christmas, or the young woman who had stood behind me under the maple 3 weeks before, clippers in her hand, careful around my ears. I did not find her, not whole. I found pieces. A jaw set the way her mother's used to set. Hands that did not shake, which surprised me more than if they had. A single look thrown toward me, half apology and half something I still cannot fully name, gone before I could decide what to do with it. They did not put handcuffs on Darius in front of me, not exactly. They walked him out to the car with a hand at his elbow. Businesslike. Unhurried. The same unhurried voice he had used at that kitchen table weeks before. Except now, it was somebody else doing the talking, and he was the one being talked at. They did not arrest Danielle that morning at all. I did not understand why until later. Detective Marsh told me she had come to his office on her own, 4 days earlier, without telling me. Given a full statement. Agreed to testify to everything she knew. In exchange for whatever the prosecutor's office could offer a woman whose own husband had done most of the actual planning. I sat in that armchair, through the whole of it, the chest across my knees. I did not go stand on the porch. I did not call out one word to either of them. I watched the cruiser back down the driveway, past the old maple, past the spot where she used to set the stool for me in summer, until it turned onto Miller Chapel Road, and I could not see it anymore. Then I sat there a long while longer, in a house that was, for the first time in 2 years, completely silent. I understood something. Whatever came next, some version of that Thursday morning was going to be the last clear picture I would ever have of my daughter as the person I raised her to be. Standing in a doorway in her robe, I was going to have to decide, eventually, what to do with everything true about her that morning. That was not that. Danielle called that evening, and the next morning. I let both calls go to voicemail and listened to each of them twice, late after the house had gone dark. I still could not tell you today what I was waiting for before I finally called her back 3 days later. Only that whatever it was not anger. It was not quite forgiveness either. It was something with no good name that county paperwork has never once had a form for. Darius pled guilty, eventually, to forgery and tampering with records. Sentenced to 4 years in a state prison. Restitution ordered on top of it that he will likely spend the rest of his working life paying down. Patricia Loomis lost her notary commission for good, referred by the court to the Ohio Secretary of State's office. She pled guilty to a lesser charge that kept her out of prison. It cost her, as far as I know, every future client who ever bothers to check a public record before hiring someone to witness a signature. Danielle gave a full statement to the Licking County Prosecutor's Office, and the recordings never once caught her originating anything. She received 3 years of probation and a felony record she will carry regardless. I did not contest one word of the prosecutor's description of her as the lesser participant. I had heard every recording myself. It was not inaccurate. I still hear him say it some nights. All we need is something that looks his signature, not his signature itself. I am 64 years old. I still live in the house on Miller Chapel Road. Alone again now. the way it was before any of this, and also nothing like before at all. The 80 acres out toward Toboso never did go to the solar company. I signed the lease myself once everything was finally properly mine to sign. Split the income 3 ways, in a trust that will pay for whatever Danielle's own children need someday, whether or not their mother and I ever fully find our way back to each other. The cedar chest is finished now, or as finished as I intend to let it get. I put the last coat of oil on it the same week Darius was sentenced. Sanded smooth everywhere, except the 2 new boards I had to splice into the lid, years after the originals, warped from sitting under a tarp through 19 winters of not being touched. Cedar that old and cedar that new do not take stain the same way, no matter what you do to try to trick them into it. I did not try very hard. The seam where the new wood meets the old is visible, if you know to look for it. A lighter stripe running the width of the lid. It will likely stay visible another 20 years before those 2 boards finally weather down close enough to fool a stranger's eye. I carried it up to Danielle's old room myself, the room she has not properly lived in since she and Darius moved into the house down the hall. Set it at the foot of the bed, the way I always meant to. The spring before Otis and I stopped speaking. Back when I still believed some things, once finished, simply stay finished. I do not believe that anymore. I know now that the best you can do with a broken thing is mend it honestly. Mend it enough that the mend itself becomes part of what it is. Visible, permanent, true. Whether or not anyone ever thinks to ask why one board is lighter than the rest. If this story stayed with you, the way it stayed with me telling it, please like this video, subscribe to True Deceit Stories if you have not already, and tell us in the comments where in the world you are watching from tonight. There is another story waiting for you right now.